what happens when the most powerful woman in K-pop becomes too powerful. Not on stage, but in real life. For years, CL built an image that felt almost untouchable. Loud confidence, fierce performances, lyrics that didn't ask permission from anyone. She wasn't trying to be cute. She wasn't trying to be safe. She was trying to dominate, and it worked. When 2NE1 exploded onto the K-pop scene, they didn't look like the other girl groups dominating television at the time. No delicate concepts, no sweet choreography. They were chaos in designer clothes. And CL was the center of that storm. Fans loved it. The industry wasn't always comfortable with it, because confidence in K-pop can be tricky. Male idols get praised for it. Female idols sometimes get labeled too much. Still, CL kept pushing. Her solo music got louder, her fashion more experimental, her performances bigger. Then came the track that would trigger one of her first major controversies. The song was MTBD. At first, it just sounded like another aggressive hip-hop track, heavy bass, swagger, attitude. But then listeners noticed something hidden inside the beat. A sample, and not just any sample. Many listeners believed the song contained a recitation from the Quran. Within hours, the reaction spread across social media. Fans from Muslim communities expressed anger, saying the use of the sample in a club-style track felt disrespectful. The criticism grew fast. In K-pop, global attention is both a blessing and a trap. The same international audience that can make an artist famous can also amplify backlash instantly. CL eventually apologized, and the controversial sample was removed from later versions of the song. But something important had already happened. The image of CL had changed. For the first time, the woman who proudly called herself the baddest female was facing a new narrative, controversial, dangerous, difficult. And in the K-pop industry, once that label appears, it rarely disappears. But the MTBD controversy wasn't the scandal that truly shook CL's career. That one was still coming. And the worst part, it wasn't even her mistake. Here's the cruel part about fame. Sometimes you don't need to make the mistake. You just need to be standing too close to the explosion. By 2014, 2NE1 wasn't just a successful girl group. They were a cultural force. Their image was too strong, too stylish, too loud to ignore. And at the center of that machine, CL had become more than a leader. She was the face of female power in K-pop. Then everything started cracking. The scandal that hit Park Bom didn't just affect one member, it poisoned the atmosphere around the entire group. Headlines multiplied. Public conversation got uglier. Sympathy turned into suspicion, and suspicion turned into silence. That's how K-pop scandals work. They don't just target the individual, they stain the whole frame. And once the frame is damaged, everyone inside it starts suffocating. Suddenly, 2NE1 was no longer being discussed only for music, impact, or stage dominance. They were being discussed like a damaged brand. Activities slowed, momentum weakened. Fans could feel something was wrong even before anyone officially said it. And when a group that powerful starts going quiet, fans don't just notice, they panic. For CL, this period was especially brutal because she couldn't fight the scandal directly. It wasn't her controversy. She couldn't step forward and explain it away. She couldn't simply win back the public with one performance. She had to stand there, publicly strong, while privately watching the structure around her weaken. That kind of helplessness is poisonous for someone like CL, because CL is built for control, stage control, visual control, energy control, narrative control. This situation offered none of that. And then came the coldest part of the story. In 2016, 2NE1 disbanded. Now, in pop culture, group disbandments are usually dressed up politely. After careful discussion, respecting the members' futures, we ask for your support. But later, CL revealed something that made the whole thing feel far uglier. She said she found out about the group's disbandment through the news, not from a private meeting, not from a heartfelt conversation, not even from management sitting her down respectfully. The news, imagine that. You build a group, you help define an era, you carry the image, the pressure, the scrutiny, and then your group's ending reaches you the same way it reaches the public, through headlines. That's not just mismanagement. That feels like betrayal with Wi-Fi. And suddenly, CL wasn't just dealing with a damaged group image, she was dealing with abandonment. Because once Toonie 1 ended, the question changed. No longer, can they recover? Now it became, can CL survive this alone? The answer wasn't obvious. Because the next scandal in her story wouldn't be loud, it would be worse, it would be silence. And silence, in this industry, can kill a career much slower than a headline, but sometimes far more effectively. Not every scandal comes with a headline. Some scandals arrive as a question. A confusing, frustrating, slowly growing question that fans repeat for years. Where is CL? Because after the collapse of 2NE1, people expected one of two things. Either she would come back bigger than ever, or disappear completely. What nobody expected was the strange middle ground she ended up trapped inside. Visible, but not fully active. Famous, but strangely stalled. Promised, but never quite delivered. And that's what made this chapter so damaging. It didn't look like disaster at first. It looked like something is coming. CL signed with Scooter Braun. There were meetings, collaborations, photo shoots, industry whispers, Western media interest. On paper, it looked like the perfect next chapter. The fearless leader of 2NE1 was finally going global on her own terms. This was supposed to be the moment, the crossover, the expansion, the proof that CL wasn't just a K-pop icon, she was an international artist. And then, nothing really landed the way it was supposed to. There were singles, teasers, features, fashion appearances, a lot of almosts. That's what made it painful. If she had openly failed, at least the story would have been clear. But this wasn't failure, it was suspension. Fans waited, then waited longer. Songs came out, but the full momentum never formed. The long-promised album kept hovering like a ghost in the room. Publicly, the narrative started shifting from excitement to confusion. Was the label holding her back? Was the American market not responding? Was CL being mishandled? Was she overthinking the moment? Was this strategy or paralysis? And the longer those questions stayed unanswered, the uglier the silence became. Because silence is dangerous when your image depends on force. CL had spent years building herself as someone unstoppable, bold, stylish, louder than the room. But when years pass and your biggest story becomes, why is nothing happening? Even the strongest image starts to crack. And the internet noticed. People began talking about her as wasted potential. Others called her one of K-pop's biggest missed opportunities. Some fans defended her, others got angry. And once again, CL found herself inside a scandal that didn't have one clean cause. That's what makes this era so fascinating. No single interview destroyed it. No one mistake caused it. No explosive controversy defined it. It was death by delay. And in entertainment, delay can be more brutal than rejection. At least rejection is honest. Delay gives you hope just long enough to become exhausting. The worst part, CL clearly still had the image, still had the taste, still had the charisma, still had the fanbase waiting. What she didn't seem to have was control. And for someone like CL, lack of control is its own humiliation. Because this wasn't just about missing a release date. It was about momentum leaking away while the world watched. The woman who once looked untouchable was now being discussed like a mystery project that never fully launched. And mysteries are dangerous. If you don't explain the silence, people explain it for you. They assume you were overhyped. They assume you lost relevance. They assume the fire burned out. But CL was never built for fading quietly. She was built for eruption. And that eruption was finally coming. Not through the old system. Not through permission, not through waiting, but through one of the most important decisions of her career, leaving. Because once CL walked away from YG, the scandal of silence turned into something else entirely, a comeback story. And comeback stories are always more powerful when the world had already counted you out. There's a point in every scandal story where the audience asks the wrong question. They ask, can she recover? But in CL's case, that was never the real question. The real question was, What happens when a woman like CL stops waiting to be managed? Because once she left YG Entertainment, the tone of the story changed instantly. No more vague promises, no more soon, no more endless industry limbo dressed up as strategy, just a break, a clean one. And let's be honest, leaving YG wasn't just a career move, it was an act of self-rescue. For years, CL had been stuck in one of the most frustrating positions an artist can occupy. Still famous enough for people to care, but not free enough to fully move. Her image remained powerful, but her momentum had been trapped behind delays, silence, and the feeling that her career was being discussed more than it was being lived. Then she walked out. And suddenly, the woman people had been calling wasted potential became something far more dangerous. Independent. Now, independence sounds glamorous when celebrities talk about it in documentaries. It usually comes with slow piano music, a meaningful stare into the distance, and some line like, "I had to find myself." In reality, it's terrifying. No giant company machine, no built-in protection, no guaranteed rollout, no excuses. If you fail now, it's yours. If you win now, that's yours too. And CL seemed to understand exactly what that meant. She didn't come back with a soft apology era. She didn't suddenly try to look harmless or sweet or easier to market. She didn't shrink herself into something digestible just because the industry had spent years mishandling her. Instead, she returned with the energy of someone who had been watching quietly and taking notes. The project In the Name of Love felt personal, reflective, almost like opening old wounds on purpose just to prove they had healed wrong. It wasn't polished in the empty way some comeback projects are. It had memory in it, pain in it, anger without shouting. That mattered. Because for the first time in years, the story around CL wasn't, "Why is she missing?" It became, "She's speaking." And then came Alpha. Even the title sounded like a threat, not reborn, not new beginning, not please remember me. Alpha, the first, the lead, the one who enters before everyone else. That title wasn't subtle, but CL has never really built a career on subtlety, and thank God for that. What made this return so satisfying wasn't just the music, it was the posture. She didn't come back sounding desperate to reclaim her old peak. She came back sounding like someone who had accepted exactly what had happened to her, the controversy, the stagnation, the silence, the disrespect, and had decided none of it would be the final version of the story. That's not a comeback, that's authorship. And the industry noticed. Because here's what people forget. Once an artist stops being controlled by the narrative built around them, they become harder to predict, harder to package, harder to kill. CL wasn't the stalled American crossover artist anymore. She wasn't just the abandoned leader of a disbanded group. She wasn't just the controversial woman people had spent years trying to explain. She was active again, present again, sharp again. And then, just when people were beginning to understand that CL had truly survived her silence era, she delivered something even bigger than a solo release. She gave the world a memory it thought it had lost forever. And when that happened, the internet didn't react like it was watching nostalgia. It reacted like it was witnessing unfinished business finally return to the stage. By the time 2NE1 walked onto the Coachella stage in 2022, the internet didn't react like it was seeing a cute reunion. It reacted like a nerve had been touched, because this wasn't just nostalgia, this was resurrection. For years, people had spoken about 2NE1 like a closed chapter. Important, yes. Influential, absolutely. But over-finished, archived in the Golden Museum of second-generation K-pop, where legends go to become reaction videos and Twitter threads. Then CL stepped onto that stage, and suddenly the word finished looked stupid. The reunion wasn't long, it didn't need to be. It had the kind of power that only comes from years of silence, frustration, memory, and unfinished emotion colliding at once. Fans screamed like they were getting time back. Newer audiences stared like they had just discovered the origin story of half the concepts their current faves were profiting from. And at the center of it was CL, still commanding, still sharp, still carrying that same energy that once made the industry nervous. But now it felt heavier, because the audience wasn't just watching the old CL, they were watching the version of her that had survived everything meant to shrink her. That's what makes this scandal story so interesting in the end. It was never about one controversy. Not really. The MTBD backlash was one piece. The fallout from Park Bom's scandal was another. The disbandment of Toonie one through headlines instead of human conversation, another. The stalled US rollout, the years of silence, the sense of being visibly sidelined while everyone kept asking, "So, what happened to CL?" That entire chain created a bigger scandal than one headline ever could. It created the scandal of disappearance. The scandal of watching one of the most powerful women in K-pop get delayed, mishandled, and slowly turned into a question mark. And yet, she didn't disappear. That may be the most offensive thing CL ever did to the people who expected her to fade politely. She stayed, maybe not always loudly, maybe not always on schedule, maybe not always in the format the industry prefers, but she stayed culturally alive long enough for the narrative to bend. That matters. Because entertainment history is full of women who were celebrated while they were useful, criticized when they became inconvenient, and forgotten when the machine moved on. CL refused the last step. She outlasted the forgetting. And when an artist does that, something changes. The old scandals stop sounding definitive. They start sounding small, not irrelevant, but incomplete. Because once someone reclaims authorship of their own story, the scandals that once looked like endings become set up. Set up for survival, set up for reinvention, set up for legacy. That's why CL's story can't be told as a simple fall and rise arc. It's more frustrating than that, more uneven, more human. Her image was never damaged by just one thing, and it was never restored by one big triumphant moment either. It came back piece by piece, through music, through independence, through refusal, through presence, and maybe that's the final twist. The woman once treated like she was too much for the system ended up becoming one of the clearest examples of why the system needed changing in the first place. Too bold, too loud, too global, too difficult to package, too hard to control. Exactly, that was the point. So if you ask what CL's biggest scandal really was, maybe it wasn't controversy at all. Maybe it was this. K-pop never quite knew what to do with a woman that powerful once she stopped asking for permission. And that confusion, that's still part of her legacy. Because CL didn't come back to prove she was acceptable. She came back to prove she was still inevitable.